The air inside the Galactic Empire's war room hummed with the faint vibrations of a starship's engine. Towering holograms flickered over the oval table, projecting Earth's surface in meticulous detail. Every continent, mountain range, and ocean meticulously charted. At the head of the room, General Threxon, a broad-shouldered Tarkari with an iridescent exoskeleton, leaned back in his chair, mandibles clicking in amusement. "Primitive," he said, gesturing to the images of Earth's defenses. "Their weapons rely on ballistic projectiles, explosive sticks." His voice dripped with disdain as chuckles rippled through the assembled officers. Across from him, Colonel Varric, a lanky Avixi with sharp, avian features, spun a digital model of a human rifle between his clawed fingers. Their technology hasn't even breached the quantum barrier. How they've survived this long is beyond reason. The room erupted in laughter, the officers exchanging smug glances. To them, Earth was a backwater planet, rich in resources but insignificant in every other regard. Its inhabitants were deemed an evolutionary fluke, a species that had stumbled into the galactic stage armed with outdated toys and unwarranted pride. General Threxon stood, his height dwarfing even the tallest of his officers. "Let us dispense with the pleasantries. The Council has decreed Earth must be subdued swiftly. A show of force will be sufficient to remind them of their place beneath us." A holographic map of Earth's western hemisphere zoomed in, revealing a dense forest surrounding a human outpost. "We'll start here," Threxon continued, his claw tracing a path to the outpost. "Our elite ground troops will secure this region and establish a forward base. Resistance will be minimal, if not laughable. The humans' outdated rifles cannot possibly harm our soldiers' energy shields." The officers nodded in agreement, their confidence unshaken. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had crushed species far more advanced than humanity. To them, Earth was not a battlefield, it was a formality. "Elite troops?" Colonel Varric quipped. "This mission requires little more than our basic infantry. Perhaps even drones would suffice." Threxon waved a claw dismissively. "It's not about need, Varric. It's about sending a message. Let them see the best the Empire has to offer before we dismantle their defenses entirely." Amid the overconfidence and mockery, no one questioned the plan. No one considered the possibility of failure. Far below, on the surface of Earth, Sergeant David Kane knelt in the dense undergrowth of the forest, his ghillie suit blending seamlessly with the mossy terrain. His M40 sniper rifle rested against his shoulder, its custom scope focused on the horizon. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows that turned the forest into a maze of shifting darkness. Kane exhaled slowly, the soft hiss of his breath audible only to himself. His eyes scanned the treetops and underbrush, trained to detect even the faintest movement. Years of training had honed his instincts to a razor's edge. For now, the forest was silent, save for the rustling of leaves and the occasional distant call of a bird. He wasn't alone in this fight, but he might as well have been. Radio chatter from the nearby outpost crackled softly in his ear, updates from soldiers preparing for an inevitable confrontation. Unlike the galactic soldiers aboard their pristine starship, Kane and his comrades had no illusions of superiority. They knew they were outgunned, outmatched, and fighting an enemy with centuries of experience in interstellar conquest. But they also knew the terrain, and Kane knew his rifle. As he adjusted his scope, he thought back to the briefing earlier that day. Satellite intelligence had tracked an alien landing party moving toward their position. The enemy's arrogance was evident in their lack of subtlety. Troops marching in tight formation, vehicles rumbling through open spaces, their energy shields glowing faintly in the dark. They didn't expect a fight. A faint smirk tugged at Kane's lips. They were in for a rude awakening. He checked his rifle one last time, running his hand along its barrel like a craftsman inspecting his most trusted tool. The weapon, those centuries behind the energy-based technology of the invaders, was a masterpiece of precision engineering. In Kane's hands, it became something more, a silent predator, an extension of his will. Through the scope, Kane spotted movement, a faint shimmer against the darkening forest. The aliens were coming. He counted at least 30 soldiers, their shields glowing faintly as they advanced in a staggered line. They walked with an air of confidence, their weapons held casually, as though this was a mere training exercise. Kane's finger hovered over the trigger. He wouldn't fire yet, not until they were deep enough into the kill zone. Timing was everything. As the soldiers disappeared into the forest shadows, Kane tapped his radio. "Command, this is Kane. Targets entering the AO. Beginning observation." The response crackled in his ear. "Acknowledge, Kane. Stay sharp. You're our eyes out there." Kane nodded to himself, settling into his position. Above him, the branches swayed gently, the forest alive with the whispers of the wind. Below, an overconfident enemy marched blindly into the jaws of a trap they couldn't see. He exhaled again, steadying his nerves. The Galactic Empire might have mocked Earth's weapons, but they were about to learn a harsh truth. Technology meant nothing in the hands of the unprepared. Back aboard the Empire's starship, General Threxon poured himself a glass of crystalline ambrosia, toasting the imminent victory. "Let this be the beginning of humanity's end," he declared, raising his glass. But far below, in the shadows of the forest, a single Marine prepared to rewrite the script. The forest was alive with tension, a sprawling cathedral of shadows and silence. Beneath the towering trees, the Galactic soldiers advanced in a loose formation, their steps crunching softly against the leaf-strewn ground. Their shimmering energy shields cast faint glows in the gathering dusk, ghostly halos that marked their overconfidence. Corporal Irix, the unit's leader, held up a hand to halt the group. His elongated eyes scanned the dense foliage, his reptilian nostrils flaring. "Stay alert," he hissed, though his tone lacked conviction. The others chuckled quietly, their weapons held with casual disdain. "Alert for what?" a soldier muttered. "Humans with toys?" Another laughed, tapping the glowing barrel of his energy rifle. "Let them try. Their bullets can't even scratch this." High above, in his perch, Sergeant David Kane lay motionless, his body perfectly camouflaged against the bark of the tree. Through the scope of his rifle, he tracked the soldiers' every movement. The crosshairs hovered over Corporal Irix's chest, steady as a predator's heartbeat. Kane's finger curled lightly around the trigger. He whispered under his breath, "Welcome to Earth." The shot rang out, a crack that shattered the forest quiet. Irix's shield flared brilliantly for an instant, then failed. A heartbeat later, his body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Panic erupted among the soldiers. They ducked instinctively, their movements erratic as they searched for the source of the attack. "Contact! Hostile fire!" one shouted, his voice tinged with disbelief. Another barked. Where did it come from? Kane watched through his scope, his lips set in a grim line. He shifted his aim to the next soldier, adjusting for distance and angle. The alien shields were advanced, but not invincible, especially not against a bullet traveling at over 2,500 feet per second, delivered with pinpoint accuracy. The second shot found its mark, punching through the neck of another soldier. His shield sputtered uselessly, and he collapsed beside Irix. The remaining troops scattered, their confidence evaporating like morning dew. The Galactic soldiers huddled behind trees and boulders, their shimmering shields flickering as they recalibrated. Lieutenant Zarek, now the ranking officer, barked orders into his comm unit. "Deploy scanners. Find the sniper." Triangular drones whirred to life, ascending into the canopy to sweep the area. Kane smirked at the predictable response. He shifted his position, crawling silently along a concealed path in the treetops, his ghillie suit blending seamlessly with the branches. One drone hovered too close. Kane reached into his pack, withdrawing a signal jammer cobbled together from salvaged parts. A flick of a switch, and the drone froze midair before spiraling to the ground in a burst of sparks. The aliens noticed. "He's jamming us," Zarek growled, his fists clenched. "Spread out. Flush him out of hiding." Their formation widened, but the forest worked against them. Every step was a struggle through tangled roots and uneven terrain. Kane, meanwhile, moved with the precision of a ghost, relocating to a new vantage point undetected. From his new position, Kane observed the soldiers' growing desperation. They fired sporadically into the shadows, their plasma bolts scorching trees, but hitting nothing of consequence. Their fear was palpable now, their earlier bravado replaced with paranoia. Kane decided to stoke the flames. He reached into a pouch and retrieved a small device, a sound mimic. Activating it, he tossed it to a distant thicket. Moments later, a sharp crack echoed through the forest, mimicking the sound of a rifle shot. The soldiers spun toward the noise, weapons raised. Kane took advantage of their distraction, lining up another shot. The third target fell, his shield collapsing as a bullet struck his temple. Another one down, a soldier screamed, his voice trembling. Lieutenant Zarek slammed his fist against a tree. "Stop panicking. He's just one human." But the words rang hollow. The once cohesive unit was unraveling, their technological superiority rendered useless in the face of a disciplined and unseen foe. Kane's breathing remained steady, his focus unbroken. He had trained for moments like this, where patience and precision outweighed raw firepower. Each shot was a calculated move, designed not just to eliminate targets but to dismantle morale. He watched as two soldiers broke away from the group, attempting to retreat. Kane anticipated their route, aiming slightly ahead of their path. A single bullet dropped both in quick succession, the round passing cleanly through one and into the other. Zarek's eyes darted around the battlefield, now littered with the bodies of his men. "Fall back. Regroup at the landing zone." But even as the order was given, Kane knew the battle was already won. The soldiers were no longer advancing. They were surviving. As the Galactic troops retreated, Kane remained motionless, his rifle trained on their backs. He let them go, not out of mercy but calculation. They would lead him to their extraction point, where the final stage of his ambush awaited. For now, the forest fell silent again, save for the rustling leaves and the soft whisper of the wind. Kane exhaled slowly, lowering his rifle. He tapped his radio. "Command, this is Kane. Kill zone confirmed. Targets neutralized. Survivors retreating. Tracking begins." "Copy that, Kane," the voice crackled back. "Well done. Stay sharp." Kane smirked faintly, his mind already calculating the next move. The Galactic soldiers had mocked humanity's weapons, believing their technology made them invincible. They had no idea they'd stepped into a battlefield designed for hunters, not prey. The Galactic soldiers stumbled through the dense underbrush, their once pristine armor caked with dirt and streaked with blood. Lieutenant Zarek led the remnants of his unit, his sharp eyes darting between the shadows that seemed to shift and ripple with unseen threats. Panic clung to his voice as he barked into his comm unit. "Command, this is Zarek. We've encountered resistance. Immediate extraction required." Static was his only response. The jamming device Kane had deployed was doing its job, isolating the aliens from reinforcements. Zarek cursed under his breath. Behind him, one of the soldiers stumbled, clutching a wound that glowed faintly with leaking bioluminescent blood. "Lieutenant, how is this possible? They're primitive." Zarek didn't answer. He had no explanation for the precision and lethality of the human sniper. This wasn't the mindless resistance of a cornered prey species. This was calculated, cold warfare. Unbeknownst to the fleeing soldiers, Sergeant Kane stalked them from the shadows, his movements silent and methodical. He had memorized every inch of this terrain, every potential ambush point, every natural choke point. The Galactic soldiers, with all their technology, were blind here. Kane stopped at the edge of a ridge overlooking the clearing where the aliens were converging, a natural kill zone, bordered by dense trees and jagged rocks. He unslung his rifle and adjusted its scope. The Galactic soldiers had made one critical error. They had underestimated the environment and the man who controlled it. The first explosion shattered the night, a deafening roar that sent shock waves through the forest. Kane had triggered one of the traps the humans had set earlier, a buried charge designed to mimic Earth's volcanic tremors. The blast obliterated the rear of the alien formation, sending bodies and debris flying. Zarek turned, his eyes wide. Ambush! Defensive positions now. The remaining soldiers scrambled for cover, their energy shields flickering as they struggled to orient themselves. Plasma bolts fired wildly into the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees and smoke. Kane moved to a new position, setting his sights on the officer who had been shouting orders. With a calm breath, he fired. The bullet punched through Zarek's shield and struck him squarely in the chest. The alien officer fell, choking on his own blood. The unit was leaderless now, their cohesion shattered. The soldiers grouped together instinctively, creating an easy target. Kane activated another trap, a tripwire that unleashed a hail of sharpened metal shards. The projectiles tore through the cluster, bypassing their shields entirely. The screams of the wounded echoed through the clearing. Some soldiers dropped their weapons, their instinct for survival overriding their orders. One of them, a younger Tarkari, collapsed to his knees, his hands raised. "Please, no more. We surrender." Kane's finger hovered over the trigger, but he hesitated. The young soldier's plea hung in the air, a rare moment of vulnerability amid the chaos. But the hesitation was fleeting. Kane knew this wasn't just a battle. It was a message to the Galactic Empire. Mercy had no place here. The shot rang out, silencing the Tarkari. The final moments of the engagement were a blur of precision and desperation. Kane moved like a shadow, picking off the remaining soldiers one by one. Their shields proved useless against the sniper's relentless accuracy and the environment's unforgiving brutality. By the time dawn began to creep over the horizon, the forest was silent again. The clearing was a graveyard of twisted metal, broken shields, and lifeless bodies. Kane stepped into the open, his ghillie suit streaked with mud and ash. He scanned the carnage, ensuring there were no survivors. Satisfied, he tapped his comm unit. "Command, this is Kane. Target neutralized. Sector secure." The response crackled back, filled with relief. "Understood, Kane. Stand by for extraction." "Well done." As Kane waited, he looked down at his rifle, its barrel still warm. The Galactic soldiers had mocked humanity's weapons, believing them to be relics of a bygone age. What they had failed to understand was that Earth's greatest weapon wasn't its technology. It was the unyielding spirit of the people who wielded it. The Galactic Empire would hear of this defeat, Kane thought. They would remember the day their most elite soldiers fell not to superior technology, but to a single human, armed with nothing more than skill, resolve, and a rifle. He slung the weapon over his shoulder and turned toward the rising sun, his expression unreadable. The war was far from over, but today was a victory, a reminder that humanity was not to be underestimated. And somewhere in the silence of the forest, the ghosts of the fallen seemed to whisper a single truth. Earth was a hunter's world, and no prey had ever left it alive.